All right, welcome to Life Extension Live. I'm Dr. Mike and my co-host,
Dr.
Dr.
Crystal.
Crystal. I always do it the wrong way. So we're entering in, it's September 1st, kind of coming off the summertime, heading towards fall and winter. So we thought we would do a series this month for our live shows every Wednesday, 3 o'clock on, aging issues, right?
Yes.
We're going to talk about this month. Let's see. I wrote it down. Forgetfulness in the aging brain, aches and pains, age related to the immune system. But today, we're going to talk about gray hair. So we're going to look at why our hair turns gray, how to get rid of that gray hair. Hey, why does some people have hair that goes gray early in life? And if you are going to color it, what's the safest, best way to do that? So a lot of things to cover today. Dr. Crystal, thanks for joining me. Let's get right into this. Dr. Crystal, why does our hair turn gray?
What researchers are seeing, it's a combination of things. One is that there's just a decline in the stem cells, those kind of originating cells that can turn into any other cell in the body, but the stem cells for the cells involved with making melanin, which that's what provides the color, the pigment. Yeah. That same melanin that makes me chocolatey brown or makes your eyes a certain color,
or makes me the lack of it makes me pasty looking. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
So it's the same pigment, and the cells responsible for producing those pigments are exposed to free radicals, oxidative stress, some hormones. We'll get into all of those things, but ultimately, now you have, the cell is not functioning properly. Those cells die. You're not making enough of that pigment.
At the end of the day, Dr. Crystal, that we talk about this a lot, right? That cells have a job to do when they're young and they're healthy, and if their environment is clean and healthy, they can do their job, right? And they have no problem. Right. But with age, like you said, inflammation, oxidative stress. I mean, it's a song and dance we've been singing and dancing to for a long time, and it's the same thing basically, with gray hair. But the first thing that I wanted to talk about, because there's not a consensus in the scientific community on gray hair, like why, essentially. Like you listed out some things that I agree with, but there's still a lot of debate. There's still kind of a mystery around gray hair.
And sometimes we can find clues when we look at people who gray early, or in babies. There are some babies that have been known to be born with gray hair. So that kind of gives us some insight into what's happening here at a cellular level. Is it nutritional deficiencies? Zinc in particular has been shown to be involved with premature graying. So we do, but you're right. We haven't figured out that cause, because if we figure out the cause, we can figure out a permanent solution.
I do know some experts in this field. They believe the cause number one is stress, right? Stress in our lives, chronic excessive stress, and graying of the hair. Tell us a little bit about what we know about that connection right now.
Yes, and actually a recent study published, a 2021 study, and I have some highlights here, published in the journal eLife, and they had the participants complete a stress diary. And during that time, and there's this fancy, technology now, high resolution scanners where they can look at the hair under, these high microscopes and really see, because what we sometimes see as a gray hair, that entire hair strand may not be gray. There
Ah,
may
okay.
be,
That's
it
interesting.
looks gray to us or it looks white to us, but you can really see how much of that strand still has pigment, how much does not. And the researchers were surprised to discover that that the graying links to stress. We know that in that hair follicle, when you're stressed, it's that that hair is exposed to or those cells that produces the melanin is exposed to those stress hormones, and it's linked to gray hair. And what was interesting in this study, one person in particular went on vacation, and when
You
they
told me
were
about
on
this one. Yeah,
vacation,
it's great.
some of their hair turned back
That's great.
the normal color, the pigment came
That's
back.
awesome. Yeah. So we should all just go on vacation. It sounds
Yes,
pretty good
more
to me. Yeah.
PTO time, please.
Yeah. Yeah. But that, it's interesting with the ability to analyze the hair, at that hair shaft level, right? With those powerful
Hmm.
microscopes, all that kind of stuff. I like what you said about, there may be more gray hair than what we see. There might be less gray hair, right? You have to really look deep into that, and stress is correlated. Now let's talk just quickly about stress, because I think, like, what does that really mean? High stress, for me, it's just like when we don't turn things off, Dr. Crystal. It's like we're just constantly going, constantly worried about something, whether it be kids, grandkids, spouses, relationships, job. It's like we don't turn things off that much. And to me, I think that's a great way to think about chronic stress in your life. If you don't have moments where you can turn things off and truly just be in that moment, reading that book, watching that, whatever that is, watching that movie, exercising, if your brain is going off thinking of all these different, to me, that's too much stress. What do you think?
I agree. And there are people who they just can't turn it off. And there could be chemical imbalances involved with that inability. Maybe you don't have enough of GABA, which is your calming neurotransmitter. Maybe there's too much dopamine going on. Maybe it could be your gut bugs. We
The gut,
certainly can link stress
right? That gut brain connection.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
yes, to your microbiome. So, but you have to find a strategy that works. And we
Yeah.
have several lives where we've talked about this, but you know, talk to a counselor, deep breathing exercises. I do that with my kids now. They're back in school. My daughter's getting stressed out over her homework, and we pause and we take deep
Pause,
breaths,
breathe.
5 or 6 deep breaths.
Yeah.
Count to 10, count
Yeah.
down from 10.
Well, that whole thing about counting and breathing, especially the breathing, it's been well shown. When you deep breathe, it activates the calming part of the nervous system. And it's hard to be anxious when you're practicing that rhythm of deep breathing. Now, you got
Yes.
to practice it, right? You got to stick with it, but overall, it does work. So mystery, the mysterious development of gray hair. One idea is stress in our lives, and it makes sense. It makes sense to me. The other one, you mentioned this a little bit, are the free radicals, the oxidative stress. I think we need to talk about that a little bit. What does that really mean? And why is it a conversation today, given our environment that we live in and all the things we use in our house, in our
Yes.
cars? Is that why we're talking about this?
Well, yes, there is a link between free radicals and some of the antioxidant enzyme systems in the body that the body has naturally to combat free radicals. But yes, the pollution in the environment, of course, smoking causes free radicals. In fact, people who smoke grade an average of 3 years earlier than non-smokers. But you also see free radicals in our water supply, our food supply. And so they're just everywhere. And we are seeing that is a link to graying hair. But I talked
Interesting. Yeah.
about those internal antioxidant systems, and one in particular, NRF2, which regulates the antioxidant response, has been identified in the hair follicles. So we know that there is something going on with the free radicals leading to gray hair. And so there are nutrients you can take, like cruciferous vegetables. Broccoli is very helpful with kind of activating that internal antioxidant system.
Yeah, and so that system, that internal antioxidant system, NRF2. Now, when I hear NRF2 coming, being a 70s and 80s boy, I think of the Nerf balls. That's not what we're talking about here, right? This is NRF2. It's basically, and we've talked about this on our podcasts and lives. Our cellular chemistry is made up of a bunch of chemical pathways, basically, right? And one of these pathways is called NRF2, and it's a pathway that generates a lot of natural intrinsic antioxidants at the end of the day, right? And so we want that master system turned on, but as we get older, that system tends to turn off a little bit, and that's where we can be affected by some of these antioxidants more. Is that kind of a way of thinking of it?
That's a great way, Dr. Mike.
Yeah. My Nerf ball, like my Nerf footballs, you know that back in those days, right? You don't know Nerf footballs, do you, Dr. Crystal?
I know what they're all about.
All right. So that's fine. That's the Nerf system. That's the idea that, free radicals in our environment, even just processing food can create free radicals in your own body and stuff. I don't know what the latest number is, Dr. Crystal. We've talked about this before, but what is it? 60,000, 70,000 industrial chemicals that are out in our environment in a variety of products that we use, from our house to our car to our skin. Right? All of that is out there, and that's leading to a lot of graying hair. Smoking is a big one. That's one of the potential causes. You gave us a stat about smoking. Can you go back over that again?
Yes. So a 2013 study found, on average, smokers went gray 3 years earlier than non-smoking. And what they're finding is they feel like the smoking changes or damages these cells, the melanin producing cells, directly. Yeah.
And obviously we want people to quit smoking. It's so important. Smoking's been linked to so many. It's really a risk factor in just about everything that we talk about, right? So it's really important. We know it can be tough, but figure out a group, whatever that process is you have to go through. Quitting smoking could be a major, major step in a healthier future for you. So keep that in mind beyond gray hair. So stress reduction, more antioxidants. You listed some out, quit smoking, obviously. Those are all important. And I do you agree, Dr. Crystal, that how well those things work also depends on the amount of grain at some point in somebody's life?
I would say, yes, it's the amount of grain. And also, we're not here to try to make you think that if you've been gray for 50 years, these things are going to, if you stop
like
smoking,
overnight. Yeah.
You can turn your hair back its normal color. A lot of these things, you find that there's almost like this, if you can catch it early, let me say it this way, then you may be able to reverse some of the gray hair. But it's a lot of these things kind of tip you over the edge. So if you're in your 30s and you're starting to see, one or two gray hairs, that stress just tips you over the edge.
And then they got more,
developing more.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the free radicals, and the same thing with the smoking.
Yeah. I think it's also important to note too that I think, and this is again a Dr. Mikeism. I don't have a reference for this. I think I've been given enough Dr. Mikeisms that people kind of know a little bit of what I mean here. But I also think it's genetic, it's individual. Just because you're graying, it doesn't mean you're not healthy. It doesn't mean that you're doing everything wrong. That's not true. It's just, grain could be a sign of stress, oxidative stress, etc. in your life. And so we want to mitigate those things to be healthier. And it's not just about gray hair. It's across the board. It's whole body effects. So I just wanted to make that point. Just because you start graying, it's not like you're failing at something. It just means, okay, maybe I should look at oxidative stress a little bit more. Maybe am I using too many chemicals in my home, on my body, what have you? And so maybe there's just small little changes you could make.
Yes, and I think it makes you pause and think about what are the things I'm using my hair products. What am I using on my hair? We'll talk about dyeing your hair as well, but think about the chemicals that's in that in the hair dyes, the permanent
Yeah.
relaxers. All of those things can
Can affect the hair,
cause
right?
more free radicals.
Yeah. Yeah, at the end of the day. So let's talk about premature graying, because that is a big issue, for women and men. You're 20 and 30s, and you're already starting to see graying hair.
Right.
That causes some stress in a young
The
person's
gray
life.
hairs cause stress.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. What do we know about premature graying?
Well, premature gray hair, we do see a direct link with zinc deficiency. Some research that was presented at a dermatology conference in 2021 showed a significant association between zinc serum levels and premature graying. And I have
That's
some of those
interesting.
details.
Yeah.
And when I saw this, I said, "Oh, another check mark for zinc." But of all the structural elements in the body, those cells that are responsible for creating and synthesizing melanin, again, that's what's giving you the pigment, of all structures in the body, those cells have the highest concentration of zinc.
Yeah, you told me that a couple of days ago, preparing all this outlines. I had no idea. I had no clue that the melanocytes and the melanin that takes a lot of zinc.
They take a lot of zinc, and what we're finding, zinc in those cells, those melanosomes, you see it on the screen, that zinc is acting as an antioxidant, fighting free radicals.
Nice.
And that's what's helping to protect those cells' ability to make melanin. So if you're thinking, what can my checklist, manage my stress, stop smoking, add in some zinc.
Zinc. Yeah, I think that's great. And most multivitamins have zinc, so you can check it out that way. Standalone zinc, 15, 20, 30, 40, even up to 50 milligrams. You'll find those different products out there in the market. But other things to consider too, right? Vitamin B12.
Yes.
That's been associated with some grain, copper, even copper deficiency. Some issues there. Maybe not getting enough protein in your body. I think that's been shown as well, right? To maybe have some premature graying. And obesity and being overweight may also be a contributing factor, which is probably more of a physical stress on the body.
Very true. Dr. Mike, I'm happy you brought that up. I was thinking about that when you were talking about stress. But stress is more than mental. There is the physical stress. If the body is healing, trauma to the body, that is physical stress, and it can always also play a part.
Yeah. All right. So let's move now. There's a couple more nutrients I want to ask you about. Before I do that, I wanted to move over to hair dyes. Because a lot of people do that. At the end of the day, I think that's the knee-jerk reaction.
Yes.
For most people, right? All right, enough gray. I'm doing something about it. And what do? They go to their hair specialist, their favorite salon, whatever that is, and they dye their hair.
Yeah.
That may not always be the safest thing to do, right?
Right. Well, I have a couple of thoughts on that. So obviously, this is not my natural hair color. I dye my hair, but two things. One, I feel strongly that I started going gray after I started dyeing my hair. I started dyeing my hair not to cover gray, but then that ended up
But then
being,
you saw it.
some of that hydrogen peroxide, some of that bleach
So
can,
it's stress in your
those are
hair, right?
oxidants.
So it's stress, it's physical stress, it's the free radicals, right? I mean, that makes sense to me.
Yes. But there's inconclusive evidence out, like nothing strong to say that yes, hair dye causes this. There was some research looking at the potential of bladder cancer, breast cancer. I went to the American Cancer Association's website and found some information related to hair dye, and most of the concern, and as you can see on the screen, relates to the hairdresser.
Oh,
Workplace exposure as a hairdresser or barber or a barber is probably carcinogenic to humans regarding bladder cancer. And then the other thought is they consider personal hair dye use to be not classifiable as to its ability to cause cancer in humans based on lack of evidence from studies in people. And this is from the International Agency for Research on Cancer. So we wanted to just highlight a couple of those key bullets. I know our Holly, who is behind the scenes answering some of your questions, she gave a great tip. If you're going to dye your hair, maybe focus in on the highlights, because the highlights aren't touching the scalp. They're
okay.
just, you're
So
just
don't
highlighting
go to the roots, basically.
exactly.
Yeah.
A trick that I use, because I dye my hair maybe a couple of times a year, there are like the spray colors. So there are all of these root touch-up tricks. There is something, and I should have brought it to show you. It kind of looks like a lipstick, and
What?
it's the color of my dye. And before my shows, this is my secret.
You just fill
I'm
it
just
in.
telling it all.
Oh no.
And before my shows, I get my little hair
I've never
color
heard of that
lipstick
before.
thing and just kind of get the roots. And those are things that I do. I like my color.
Okay. All
So
right. All right.
those are tips.
Yeah, that's really good. So dyes can be used just because it looks like the issue with dyes is more to the person who's applying it over and over and over again to multiple clients, and that's more of the issue. It's not necessarily you as an individual going to get your hair dyed once in a while. I guess that's
Right.
kind of what the
And one
research
other
says.
tip, I'm sorry. Look for a semi-permanent or the temporary hair dyes. They
Okay.
are gentler.
On your gotcha. All right. So hey, at the end of the day, gray hair happens. We're entering into fall and spring now, September 1st, believe it or not. And we thought we'd start with gray hair. We got other aging issues coming up throughout the month in September. So hopefully you learned something today. I know I did. Dr. Crystal, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Dr. Mike.
Don't forget, we go live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. So please like these shows. If you do, comment and share. We really appreciate that. And we look forward to you guys joining us on next Wednesday at 3 p.m. I'm Dr. Mike. Take care.